Okay, so carrying forward the theme of patterns this month, in the rest of the batches, I have been doing mosaics. And then I realized that this batch, everyone has done mosaics with Susan. So, absolutely no point in repeating. Although I know that what I will show you will be a different way of doing mosaics, but I felt let's just leave that for another time. I'm sure there are so many other things that I can do with you guys, and then uh, this the whole idea of looking for patterns can be expanded beyond what you have already done. So, last 2 days I was racking my brain. Now that I had decided on mosaics, my train was on that track, and now I had to uproot myself from that and look for something else. And I gave myself a right migraine in the process because I was stressing out so much. And this morning I just said, you know what, forget it. I'm just gonna do mosaics. I don't care. I'm sure it'll be different. If not, it's a repetition. Big deal. I'm giving myself all sorts of justification. And then I realized that this is exactly why I wanted to do patterns, is because my claim is that you see patterns everywhere, but you don't notice them. And I'm thinking this is the perfect way to figure out what are the patterns I'm missing. I can't I can't say one thing and then find four things and say, oh, you see patterns everywhere. It's not right. So it became a challenge for me. And usually a good night's sleep helps. So in the morning, I suddenly woke up and I said, okay, wait a minute, I have it. And I found these reliefs, wall reliefs that you get, or sculptural reliefs on all sorts of things. You have them on buildings, you have them on even wooden furniture, maybe, or just wooden panels. They also are patterns. They may be very distinct motifs, but they still qualify as patterns as far as our theme is concerned for this month, because they're not plain. There is some kind of texture to it. There is some kind of a design that is employed and a technique by which it changes the surface to a certain extent. And I guess that can be a definition for what becomes a pattern, that there is something other than it being plain. So, for this one, I want to do a little bit of a mix of things. We will do a little bit of sketching and painting on top of that pencil sketch to create that whole relief effect. And then we'll also try to see how we can recreate this in watercolor. Both, of course, will use watercolor also. And during the process, I want you to think about how you can use this in different, maybe for different applications. I can think of a few which I will suggest to you, but I don't want you to be limited to just that. So I'm not going to give you my suggestions. But as you're making this pattern, also think about where can you use the patterns. So we'll start off with just observing these. I sent the first two images and then I realized that these are symmetrical images, which are everyone's, I guess, Achilles heel and have been in school. What was this called? Freehand drawing or something like that. And the teacher would very cruelly come to class and just make half the design and then just throw us in the deep end and say, now you complete it. How do we do it? You have to tell us. But didn't happen. So then we have something like that, which is not only a symmetrical design, it has a face on it. So I saw these and I thought, okay, this is me being the school teacher, school art teacher, and I thought, let me ease you into this misery by giving you simpler or smaller motifs. They are still um, they are still symmetrical, but they are a little easier to handle. And we will be then at least groomed enough to see how lines work and how they can be thrown on a symmetrical surface much easier. So let's start with this acanthus leaf. And as usual, we just go in with the basic figures, basic shapes to understand what the proportions are. Okay, so I am making a square. Okay, so this is where our square sits. And I'm dividing the square into 4 parts. So, a few things that, not just 4, I think we can break it up into more parts also. And this is fairly self-explanatory. You don't even need me to explain how we can go about this. Except that when we are making a design like that, it sometimes helps to draw the main, I guess, spine of the shape before anything else. So consider drawing these action lines. You have the center line. Why is this happening? Sorry. Yeah. So you will have this action line in the center, and then you have this. So we break up the shape into the spinal structure of each of those elements first. This helps you to gain some idea of the overall composition, because if you start from the top and start making these shapes, sometimes you lose the grace of the shape because you've not drawn this spine. Once you have drawn that, then you can move to more supporting structures, like you can create this line here, which is thinner at the bottom but becomes, as in this distance is less but this distance is more. So this gives you the skin of the shape. And do the same thing on both sides. That way you can keep an eye on how the design is developing. Don't be tempted to make one entire leaf on the left and then make it on the right. It is very difficult for us to see if our shapes are accurate when you complicate the structure too much. So like I'm doing right now, make one small thing on the left and then make the same small thing on the right, repeating the strokes as mirror opposites, and you should be able to get a nice rough sketch. Then you can check for symmetry and make the fair design. Yes, Alka.
Aditi, just as a question, I wanted to know, supposing you have to make something that is so symmetrical,
Mhm.
then is it not more efficient to do one part of it and just trace it on the other side?
Oh yeah,
So,
tracing is any day easier, no doubt. But it all
I
depends
mean,
on.
not just because of the easier factor, but because then you'll get it exactly, the same. I mean, if you have made any slight variations on this side, then that same variation will get reflected on the other side.
Yeah,
That
yeah. So if you have to make an absolute mirror opposites, tracing is a great way to go about it. But sometimes when you trace, it's like when you make a mirror of a face.
Yeah,
There is something unnatural that happens,
correct.
and we just need to be aware of that. Now, for something like this, it really does not matter. The exercise for us is being able to plot a symmetrical pattern. So
Yeah,
it will
okay.
help you to start observing
Yeah,
distances and
correct.
all better. But tracing any day is perfectly okay. You don't have to, I mean, you don't have to go through the trauma.
I was just thinking, no, because this is, I mean, it's a good thing. One should know how to draw. both sides this thing. But I mean, if you really want it for a
Yeah,
specific purpose, then is it okay to
absolutely.
trace them?
Yeah, absolutely. And suppose you have to make multiples of these, you make a master, you make one side, then you make the second side, retrace the whole thing on a separate sheet, and then you can keep tracing that all over the place also. So that is perfectly fine as well. Okay. So we are using this fleur-de-lis as a practice sketch, and I want you to first visualize where and how it's going to be. Looking at the reference, oh, I haven't shared that reference images, the with the guides. Okay, so we can start off with making a square as usual, and don't make it too big. Break it up into 4 parts and then 8 parts. Now, when you make multiple guidelines like that, it can get a little confusing, huh? So, if you want to, you can make a few guidelines taller, the ones that cut the quarters, so that you can tell which one is which. And then start making the spine. Now, a little bit of the leaf does go below the square. And if I were to measure it, it is maybe about half of 1/4 of the bottom square. And it goes a little beyond the center 2 squares in its width. Right, so we have the central spine. Then just at the first line from the bottom, you can make a rectangle to accommodate the binding element. So you can refine these shapes later, but first just plot them and put them down. At every point, also please check the relationship of the lines that you are drawing with their counterparts, regardless of what the guidelines say. If this, like right now, the line on the right that I've made it according to how I see it on the guidelines, but the guidelines also are not very accurate. So I have to check if the curve on the right matches the curve on the left. That is more important than sitting true with the guidelines. Then I'll draw a line for the main upright facing leaf. Actually bring this downward. And for the top, the first thing to do is make a rough shape all over. Don't make the detail before you make the shape in which the detail has to fit. Likewise for the sides as well. Make the full leaf shape first. And even for the bottom, you can make a rough guideline like this, within which then you can start making the details. Very often, if you don't make something like this or like this, you cannot cut it further and make sure that your symmetry is maintained. Like in the case of the tip on top of the central leaf like pattern, I can easily make two indents or incisions on which I can then make the little extra leaf patterns. Instead of starting from one side and making them in one way, and then on the other side I have to come downward and I get completely lost in the design. And by the way, this is how all these patterns are designed in the first place. You will make a, you will make a form, and then in that form you will start making details. The designing and sculpting is always also done in the same ways. So it's much easier to draw it with that in mind. Once you've figured out the proportions and you've drawn the basic stuff, then you can go back to the original reference image to see the details. Now, right on top of the leaf here, there is a very small curved line that goes into a slightly bigger flourish. So don't miss that little thing. That's a cute transition from this big shape down to the fold. Even here on the side, make that semicircle first. And maybe on top you can make a semicircle as well. Look at the placement of these before you start detailing those out. All right, once you're done, before you erase the lines, just make a nice border around that square for as a frame for the entire relief. That way it doesn't look lost, and we can use the help of the straight lines already drawn to make our border as well. Okay. So you'll often come across elements like these in old buildings, sometimes things like gargoyles and all, not just a relief like that, but even sculptural elements. They make very good, um, I guess there's so much cute, non functional embellishment in these little bits. They are there to add some interest to an otherwise boring panel, maybe. So each thing, um, each object was designed to give pleasure to the eye or pleasure to the user in some form or another. Using that, whatever that object was, say if you have a cupboard or if you are just even in front of a wall, you didn't want to leave a dead blank space. It almost seemed like you're wasting that space when you could tell a nice story. And all that came to an end in the early 1920s when people started, I guess they must have gotten fed up with all this decoration and went to the other extreme and decided now we're not going to decorate anything. We're just going to keep everything blank and keep everything peaceful. Today, it is believed by some architects that this not having things of joy, just a few designs here and there, a few, I guess, um, call out to something in nature is the reason why we experience a lot of stress. Wherever you go, you see dead blank walls and you see white light. Whereas, if you think about when you're going to walking through old buildings, you rarely have a flat wall. There will be a little bit of a molding, say. So the wall is broken up. That flat surface does not just stand in front of you with a certain deadness, and that gives you a sense of just warmth and comfort. So there is I guess, a new wave of architects that are going back to some amount of embellishment in their buildings. Don't leave it blank. Don't leave the canvas without saying anything. It doesn't always have to be opulent, but it can maintain or retain that sense of warmth. All right, so once you're done with this, we are going to quickly shade and darken some of the lines. So at that point, I want you to observe the sketch, sorry, not the sketch, the reference image, and try and replicate the dark and light according to what you see. So for example, all the right sides are shaded, and the shadow is very sharp along the central spine. And then you have a few shapes inside of that. So there are a few places where the light is high lit. You want to keep those intact. And then a few places where you'll see some thickness of the stone itself. So when you're shading, just take care that you are you're not making it too dark on the first go, and also that you're not sealing off the paper too much. So if you press the pencil too hard, then it seals off the paper and you cannot add more graphite to that as you go along. You want to be able to add more because our shading will change according to what we see, so that it matches the contrast of the reference image. All right, then we shade the back as well, so that the light sections can stand up. Now when you're shading this, I would encourage you to hold the pencil a little far away and just use your fingers back and forth. You will probably get a lined texture, and that's okay in the beginning. Those some places you will have a darker shadow, that's also okay, but we can use this opportunity to practice sketching a little bit. You will often find that you get lines when or before the pencil becomes blunt. If you sharpened your pencil, it will give you some lines in the beginning, but don't roll the pencil too much, then that surface flattens out and you get more even tones. So this kind of shading is perfectly acceptable if you have a few lines, a few cross hatches and things happening, because the quality of the illustration can be um, can actually be more interesting than just an accurate photographic replica. So if you are getting textures in your um, during your shading process, just go ahead and allow them. Don't try to smudge them away. That smudging sometimes makes the the piece look very artificial. Now, when you're shading, you'll notice that the shading on the left and the shading on the right will be different. That's because even if the light source is the same, when it moves from one side to the other side, it will create a different kind of shadow. So, to your point now, Alka, whether we can replicate the design by tracing, you can trace the structure, but if you have to trace the shading, then it would still be better to create some variations. Even if you do them a little artificially, anticipating that, it's fine, but keep the shading slightly different. So this goes for when you are, suppose you're making this digitally, you do all the work on one side, scan it, and then say, okay, I'm just going to repeat this on the other side. That is also a point where it might start looking a little. So that's, I guess, that uncanny valley. It's either too perfect or too close to reality, but it does not seem right. You know what I mean? That's, we need to be wary of that.
Close to reality, but doesn't look real.
Yeah, it feels like something is off and you can't put your finger on it, but it's just it gives you a feeling of unease.
So yesterday I was watching TV and there is this new animated series on the Mahabharata called Kurukshetra. I don't
Ah,
know if you've seen it. The
I
animation is so good, but like you're saying, it's too good. Like, it's too
yeah.
perfect. But it's, but the backdrops and all, my goodness, what a lot of detailing. And somehow I felt it looked better than all those garish sets that they make.
Yeah, I've
When they
been
did the Mahabharata and all, I
correct.
somehow preferred this animated version of it as compared to the real. But even the expressions, they showed face of Hanuman and
Yeah.
Krishna and all the avatars and all that. They were so well done, the eyes and everything. It was
I've
really
been
quite very
yeah, I've
beautiful.
been waiting for that series to start. I saw the trailer last
Trailer,
week.
yeah.
So impressed. I was praying literally that it should be that it should be
Okay,
worth
I was just
it.
literally, my eyes popped, like, it just popped up
Yeah.
on the screen. And I couldn't stop watching it. I was so mesmerized.
It is a that is a completely underutilized franchise, I feel. All your superhero movies and everything can be covered in this Mahabharata, I think. Okay, now after you've done a little bit of shading, you'll start noticing that we have certain more prominent shadows. So these now you can darken. These shadows are um, the what's called the cast shadow. A shadow cast by one object, one part of an object on another part, and it's like a it's like the bigger version of the same small shadows that we've been shading so far. You'll also see that, like over here, you have these dots, which is because the line that joins the middle of the petals has eroded, and all you see are these dots over here, which correspond to the dots on the left and to these dark sections between the little leaflets on the left hand side. Then there are some cracks, so pay some mind to those cracks and try to draw them very subtly. There are some broken parts where the shadows are more intensified. Okay, how's the shading going? Almost done? If you want, this is a nice place to also use paper tape to seal the edges and make a proper frame. Okay. I had intended to make this a much more sketchier version, but it's not turned out like that. It's way, way too refined. And we've spent almost an hour in doing just this much. Uh, but while you guys are finishing, maybe I can show you what I mean by the sketchier version. There is another one next to this, sorry, the one I've shared afterwards. So I'll just show you how I would do that as a sketchy version. And this is more for practice. It should take no more than, I guess the only way one can do this is to set a proper time limit. The rules remain the same. You make your guidelines, and this time you can also make the guidelines for the point where the petals join. Like that, it just becomes a lot easier. And put a 5-minute timer. And whatever you have to do, you have to accomplish in 5 minutes. So there's one thing about understanding a technique and replicating the technique to create a design. All of that is fine. But you know something, the one thing that I guess nobody talks about is that in the process of making this, the experience will expose you to certain things that can happen when you are drawing. Like, for example, what we see over here as these grooves inside the center of the petal can be some places they are eroded enough to just sit within the center. Some places they go beyond and then they have probably melted into the center groove around the circle, things like that. It gives you an opportunity to experience these things, which no matter how well you know the technique, you do not learn without the experience of making this design. And then when there is the opportunity to make the design, those few observations that you have made about stone masonry, for example, become so ingrained that you will notice certain factors even beforehand, like that there is a 3D space between the design in the foreground and in the background, that the background ends are not always sharp. You'll see a 3D over here. So in sometimes when a design is obscured, how do you make up for what is not visible? That comes from these experiences.
Also, the curve of this petal, like it kind of goes up and goes dips and then comes up again towards the end,
Correct.
which you can see very clearly on the stone.
Right.
How would you do that?
So the trick over there is you see that because it narrows at the tip and becomes a little wider along the center. So that gives you the illusion that the tip is probably bending down and then coming further, coming up a little bit. So if I just shade this part, then leave a highlight over here and then shade this part, it creates the illusion of that dipping. Okay, has everyone finished the first one, the fleur de lis?
In this, the last flower one,
Yeah,
where we see lot of mm, like
text.
pores on the picture.
Yeah.
So how do we make that? Is it just we make some dark patches somewhere or the other, like ununiformly?
Just make dots like that, like stippling.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So even that's all that is needed.
Mhm. Okay. Yeah.
So many times these partly eroded pieces look very good if they are also sketched like this instead of making them too refined, because this is like a translation into a different medium. What you see in stone is now not a pristine brand new sculpture with sharp edges. This is now something that has been beaten down because of the weather, so the lines are not sharp enough, they may not be straight. So the less accurate your illustration is, the more close to that picture it will look in spirit. So you translate that spirit into paper. So when you're shading over here also, if your lines are a little scratchy, that can really look interesting on this sculpture. Later on, when we start painting this, even the paint does not have to be smooth. It can be a little patchy, and that will also add more flavor. Okay, so let's paint the fleur de lis, acanthus leaf first. And once you've spent so much time on shading, the next part is very easy. To make this look very dramatic, we will we will paint a little blue in all the places that you see the shadows. So we can use cerulean blue to start with. Oh, wait a minute, I'm going to retract that. Let us make the full backdrop first because it is a single color. Yes, instead of making the shadow first, which is a small patch, let's make the single color backdrop. Already we have shadows, so that shading will create the depth, and then we can add the patches of the color. So if it were something else, like in the case of the carpet, which incidentally I finished last week, because there were so many patches, we made the shadow first because it had to be a swish of color, one single swish. Imagine doing that at this point. Of course, I added extra dark shades in the color itself. This is not part of the shadow we made, but it does help in these light sections. Had this been a plain carpet, we could have painted the carpet and then made that swish of shadow also, it wouldn't matter. But in the case of this stone sculpture, everything is one single color. If we had a different color over here, a different one here, a different one here, then making the shadow first would make sense. All right, so let's try and make the color of the stone. It is not a straightforward yellow ochre. Since we don't have any other color happening here, the challenge is not too difficult. Let's try color matching. So I think the base is yellowish a little bit. So we'll take a little bit of yellow ochre. And then you notice that the yellow ochre is very yellow. So how do you tone that down? You can use a little bit of cobalt blue. Okay, this is what I'm doing. And I'm trying to match the color to what I see on screen. And all of us have different screens. The screens are going to be at different brilliance settings. So we are all going to see a different color. I am creating the color that I'm seeing, but I want you to see the process. So what I see over here is a slightly yellowish shade, which I want to tone down. So I can add a brown. This brown burnt umber has a slightly reddish tone. So the yellow has now become slightly reddish also, and because of cobalt blue it will go towards slightly greenish also. Okay, now it's becoming more neutral, still yellowish. Maybe I can add a little black. And then I will check what shade I see over here. And if that works, I could use it. So let's give one test. This is not bad. Pretty close. But now I could also come to this shade from the other direction. What if I start with a blue shade and then add something else to that? Maybe let's start with a cobalt blue. And to that, I can add a burnt umber. Let's see where that takes us. This is also not bad at all. And maybe to this, I'm going to add a little bit of orange. I don't know what's going to happen. That little vibrance that you want can come even from orange. See? So even without using a yellow ochre, I've been able to create a similar shade. Alright, so just for fun, I'm going to use the second shade, not the first most obvious shade that I had thought of, which is cobalt blue, burnt umber, and just a little bit of orange. And it's a very, very watery shade, which we will completely wash over. But maybe some places, if you want, you can leave a highlight. Because as always, if you have the opportunity to enhance a contrast in your picture, don't let that go. So contrast is nothing but the difference between the lightest and the darkest shade. And a high contrast picture not only has high extremes of the darkest and lightest shades, but they also have a larger range of shades of gray in between also. So just use a light hand. And if all of this gets too much, we have done enough shading. So if you want to just put a wash down, just go ahead and do that. Now, once you finish with the wide brush, you can use the same shade and deposit colors in the smaller sections with a small brush. Or if you've got paint in one area, you can spread that with a smaller brush much better. I'll use the other color in the second illustration, and this time I'm being very, again, a little less careful. Now I would like to attempt a little bit of adventure. So I'm using a small brush, slightly thickish paint, and dropping color while the paint is still wet. So I'm not controlling beyond a point where this paint is going to end up. I want to create that sense of drama without predicting what is going to happen. Very dangerous living. Now this is something that it's like a controlled chaos. You know the paint is wet, and you know the paint, the new color that you are applying can go anywhere. So don't put it obviously in places where you want to have certain highlights, but using a small brush where the control comes from, allow for these magical things to just occur. So don't put too much paint there so that it doesn't create a big blob, but just see how instantly attractive that color looks. And in the original photograph, the color is not blue, it's not this vibrant, it's almost like a brown, dirty color. And we get so drawn into making that color so accurate that the picture starts looking very dull. I've seen this in a lot of cases. You have something beautiful, like a food bowl or something, and behind that there is some wall with some sculpture, and that color is all just like one big dull, everything is brown, brown, brown. So what I'm saying again over here is that you translate the um, the color for what it represents. Here you have a light color which represents a material, some kind of stone. So you need a light color. Then you have erosion that is represented by not by dark black dots, though that is what it is. We are making some kind of textural dots in pencil. Then when you have to show shadows, the shadows create a different color in the sculpture. So just try any other color. You could try green also, you could try red, orange, even if it's a bright color, it will be translated as a shadow by our brain. Okay, now if the sculpture on top has dried, the first part is you can use the same shade to make some parts darker, like in this case. Now, this kind of illustration does become better if you use a little bit of brush manipulation, which means that when you are using the brush, in some places you use less pressure, in some places you just use more pressure and press the brush down like this. You cannot create these with careful painting like that. You just start making darker and darker patches. So press the brush down and create these shapes. And using the same color will at least keep you safe in case you make a very dark patch. It won't look too off. So I want to show you the shapes that I'm making here. Something like this, where I start off by just touching the tip of the brush, and as I come down I press the brush, and then further I can lift the brush up to a point. This is a very slow movement, so don't make it too fast. That way, when you have to paint this edge, if you try to make it as a shape, that edge will not turn out pretty looking at all. So that brush manipulation will really help it look good. Yeah, so look at this one. Yeah, it's dried up. Just the tip over here. Just this much is enough. And then on the center, when you want to make this darker, but not like one blob, start with a very light line and start pressing it down. And you can keep lifting and pressing it in the appropriate places so that you don't eat into the other highlights that exist in the neighborhood. Then to the same color, you can add a little black or burnt umber or both. Intensify the shadow. And instead of using a contrasting color or another different color, we can continue to create more intense shadows using the same shade but making it more concentrated and deeper and deeper and deeper. I think this could still do with a little bit of blue here. The pencil shade.
Aditi, I have to go. I'll catch up with the recording later.
All right,
Bye,
bye.
everyone.
So the pencil shading will have done half the work anyway. and resist the temptation of making an outline for the whole painting. That will again look very artificial. Okay. Now for the last bit on this one, you can easily just do a nice splatter of any of these colors that we've done, or even like a blue, to create the fine texture. Of course, do this before, so you know that this is what you want, because sometimes it can be you'll do it and then you say, it was better without. So keep the amount of pigment very low and not very, so you won't get very dark dots. It's just a very subtle texture in the backdrop. Notice how similar these colors have landed up being, the two shades that were made here. So this was yellow ochre, cobalt blue, burnt umber, and black. And this was cobalt blue, plus black. Oh no, not even black. Plus burnt umber and orange of all things. Now for the bottom one, I can continue to add deeper colors, and in fact, I can go a little more like party theme and make it even more multicolored. And a lot of this will look good because of the brush manipulation. You can create a lot of depth by mixing up contrasting colors. And for the shadows also, instead of using black, I'll just use some mix of whatever colors I have. So there was a burnt umber, there's a cobalt blue, whatever I find handy, just grab it and start painting the shadows. The moment the shadows come in, this starts looking so believable, even though the shapes are all over the place, the colors and the texture is all over the place. And this too can have a splatter, but maybe for just continuing this crazy texture thing or color thing, this can have blue dots instead of the brown shade. Okay. There can be a lot more that we can do in this. We can enhance the shadows in both cases, keep adding layer upon layer. As things dry, we'll know more and more about how this looks. But essentially, even with just pencil shading, we can achieve a lot in the base drawing itself, and then just a wash is good enough. Okay.